Hey everybody, Ross here, and this is Bible Study Silverstone. If this is your first time on this channel, click the first link down in the description, or if you'd like to see what's just been happening recently, click the second link in the description to go back to Exodus 3. Now, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right on into Exodus 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered and said, "But suppose they will not believe me, or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, 'The Lord has not appeared to you.' So the Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A rod.' And he said, 'Cast it on the ground.' So he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. So the Lord said to Moses, 'Reach out your hand and take it by the tail.' And he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Furthermore, the Lord said to him, 'Now put your hand in your bosom.' And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And he said, 'Put your hand in your bosom again.' So he put his hand in his bosom again, and drew it out of his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh. Then it will be, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe the message of the latter sign. And it shall be, if they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river, and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land." Then Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." So the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, deaf, the seeing, and blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with you with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say." But he said, "O my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send." So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well, and look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him, and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth, and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as God. And you shall take this rod in your hand, with which you shall do the signs." So Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go and return to my brethren who are in Egypt, and see whether they are alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go, return to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead." Then Moses took his wife and his sons, and set them on donkeys, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in your hand. But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed, I will kill your son, your firstborn.' And it came to pass on the way, at the encampment, that the Lord met him, and sought to kill him. But Zipporah took a sharp stone, and cut off the foreskin of her son, and cast it at Moses' feet, and said, 'Surely you are a husband of blood to me.' So he let him go. Then she said, 'You are a husband of blood.' because of the circumcision. And the Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went and met him on the mountain of God and kissed him. So Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord who had sent him, and all the signs which he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then he did the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked on their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. Alright, the first thing I'd like to point out is the rather odd way the chapter starts. If you had not read Exodus 3, you'd have no idea what was going on here, because we're right in the middle of the conversation started in Exodus 3. Now, this is a good opportunity to point out that the original manuscripts of the Bible did not have chapters and verses like we have now. The original manuscripts were only separated by their books and were intended to be read either in their entirety or in large chunks. When the Bible was translated into our more modern languages, the translators inserted chapter breaks and verse numbers to make it easier to reference and theoretically read. The problem with this is that the chapter breaks happen in odd places, like we see here. They disrupt the flow of what's being said, and that disruption causes you to lose vital context. So if you want to see the real big picture of what's going on in a book, break it up into large sections or read it in its entirety. If you were to read Exodus in one shot, it would take you between 3 and 4 hours, which I realize not everyone can commit to that. So it'd be best to break it up into about 10 chapter segments over 4 days, which would take you just over about an hour a day. If you'd like to see what I'm talking about in a more shorter form, try it with either Ephesians or Philippians. Ephesians is only 6 chapters long, and Philippians is only about 4. Let's see. Start out reading 1 chapter a day until you finish the book. And then the day after you've read that last chapter, read the entire book in one sitting and see how much more you notice than when you were only reading 1 chapter at a time. Short books like those will only take you between 20 and 30 minutes to read entirely. So, what's more doable? Now that that's out of the way, Exodus 4 is dominated by Moses' objections to God's calling. Keep in mind that as I go through each objection, they sound reasonable at first, mainly because Moses is looking at things from a natural perspective. He seems to forget, though, that he's talking to God, with whom nothing is impossible. So, Moses starts by claiming that the people wouldn't believe he was sent by God. So God gave him the ability to turn his rod into a snake, to make his hand leprous and make it clean again, and to turn water into blood. Kind of seems like overkill to give him 3 signs when 1 probably would have done the trick. But I think that God wanted to leave no doubt in the people's mind that Moses was his man. Now, Moses' second objection was that he was slow of speech and tongue, and that he was not eloquent. It's generally agreed from this that Moses had some kind of speech impediment, like a stutter or something. And I really like God's response here he asks Moses, who makes someone in whatever way they are? God also tells him that he will be with Moses and teach him what he needs to say and how he needs to say it. To put it in our modern way of speaking, Moses said, Lord, I just don't talk right. To which God says, and? So what? I made you that way. I'm going to give you what you need to do what I'm calling you to do. Moses was basically trying to cop out on God by pulling his disability card. I can tell you from experience, that excuse doesn't fly with God. On the contrary, I've learned that my disability allows God to do powerful things through me that might not be as effective coming from someone in a quote unquote normal body. But why is that? In today's world, the sad truth is that people with disabilities are not expected to be anyone or do anything. And that belief is so strong that millions and billions of dollars are spent to keep disabled people in nursing homes or not giving them any incentive to work, progress in life, or keeping them in menial jobs because more responsibility must surely be too much for them. When they try and push through those assumptions, they're met with pity, discouragement, disguised as do your best, you'll get there eventually, and just outright rejection. If and when they break through, though, people are shocked at the things disabled people have to say and are hanging on every word. Just to use my own experience as example, I can't tell you how many times well-meaning people have come up to me like, hey, how are you? When they see that I can talk, they're surprised, but they still treat me like I'm either a child or I'm mentally challenged. Then they'll ask me something like, so what do you like to do? To which I say, I'm in college. Their eyes get really big. And they say, what are you going for? I tell them software engineering, and their eyes get even bigger. Most times they just walk away after that. But sometimes they say, oh, that's great. What else have you got going on? I'm running a Bible study channel on YouTube, and I'm writing my third novel on the side. You know, it's kind of the things I say, which often gives me an opportunity to tell them about Jesus. And that's really the goal. In public speaking situations, God uses my disability to allow me to have more impact on whoever's listening. Because everyone's initial reaction is, whoa, he's different. I mean, what's he got to say? I'm sorry, I know that was a huge distraction. But I'm trying to point out that there is no excuse for not doing what God has called you to do, like what God is doing with Moses. Now, moving on. Moses' third objection was an outright refusal, telling God to send someone else. Understandably, God was rather angry. He had removed every obstacle for Moses to do his mighty work and promised to be with him. And he still refused. I mean, what more could Moses possibly want? So God makes it even easier for him and assigns Aaron to be his mouthpiece. Without any more excuses, Moses obeys. When God told Moses, moving on again, when God told Moses that everyone who sought to kill him were now dead, it was reassurance that he would be able to carry out God's plan. In verse 23, it's interesting how God is already talking about what the final plague will be. way in advance. Now, on the way to Egypt, it appears that God tries to kill Moses in verses 24 to 26. When Zipporah quickly circumcises one of their sons, God relents. I had no idea what this meant at first. But after a bit of digging at BibleStudyTools.com and in the MacArthur Bible's commentary, it looks like God was pursuing Moses because he did not circumcise one of his sons, which was the sign of his Hebrew heritage. If you recall from Genesis, God takes circumcision very seriously. But beyond that, I can't say more because I have no idea what needs to be said, honestly. And finally, the chapter ends with the people of Israel hearing of God's coming deliverance, and I can't imagine how relieved they must have been. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, or suggestions, leave them down below in the comments. And I know I kind of rushed through that when I was kind of really strapped on time for recording today. But anyway, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh, to make you fruitful where you are, and to forget the pain of your past. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all soon in Exodus 5.